one thing about that is I need my notes up. This is not going to be...
Are you a notes app person too? I'm a notes app person.
I am not a notes app person. I'm a inconsistent, disorganized person. So anyways, that's not what we're here to talk about today. Sarah, what are we here to talk about today?
We are here to talk about horror movies. We are two siblings with no credentials, except that we like watching horror movies.
Yes, we have 0 degrees in film studies or literature. Did you study literature at all?
I did, but I don't know anything.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't want to talk about it.
Nobody can know.
We'll restart. We'll eventually we'll re-record an intro. We're working it out. This is
cool.
the first time.
It's cool. We're getting comfortable.
But yeah, welcome to Horror/Stories. We are two siblings with no credentials. We just like watching horror movies. My name is Sarah. I use she, her pronouns, and I write about books for fun a lot. I mostly write about like fantasies and fear. So I write about how fantasies are actualized or how fear is manufactured in fiction. So that does kind of relate to what we'll be talking about, which is horror movies. But it also, I don't know what I'm talking about. I just write about it.
I'm Matty. I'm Sarah's brother. I use he, they pronouns, and I play drums and work in customer service. And I really, really love horror movies. And I watch them obsessively all the time, as much as I can. I never have enough people who want to watch horror movies with me because they're too scared.
And that's why we're going to talk about them.
Yes. So we kind of talked before the podcast, and full disclaimer, we have never recorded a podcast before. So this is a little bit new for us. We're trying some stuff out. But we came up with a list of questions that we thought would be kind of good at helping you, the listeners, get to know us a little bit better, and also to talk about some of the ways that we experience the genre. So Sarah, how did you get into horror?
How I got into horror is it's mental health related, which I know is a very sensitive topic, and I'm not trying to give anyone advice or anything like that. This is just my personal experience. This is what happened to me. This is how I got into horror. So please do not perceive it as anything other than that. But basically,
this is not medical advice. We are not medical professionals.
No. I'm just going to start from the beginning.
Go for it. Yeah.
Okay. So I was a really, really big scaredy cat my entire life. If I saw even something remotely scary in a movie or anywhere, I just wouldn't sleep for days. I remember watching not even the full Jumanji movie, just part of the movie Jumanji with my friends when I was a little kid, probably like it had to be less than 5. And my friends who were older than me told me, that character's name is Sarah. That's you when you grow up. And I was so scared. I was terrified of that. I fully believed that was my fate and was very scared. I also distinctly remember being with Mom in a family video, and they had The Mummy playing on one of the monitors, and it was a scene with the scarab beetles under that guy's skin, and I was so scared that Mom had to go and tell them to turn it off, and I don't think they did turn it off. I think she made me go sit in the car. But then finally, when I was about 22, I had really severe insomnia. I was experiencing a lot of things that felt like paranoia and fear that I now know are or were anxiety, but I didn't have the vocabulary at the time, but I was having really heightened feelings of fear and anxiety at all times. Mm-hmm. And I went to go and talk to my doctor about my insomnia, and she suggested that I try a prescription for anxiety, and it really it had a big impact on how I was able to interact with the world. I was finally able to sleep, and I was able to handle things that had scared me before. And I started to kind of poke that line of fear. And I think a lot of the reasons why some people like horror movies is that it's a form of anxiety. It's a form of fear that you can control. And you know that everything in this moment, everything in this product is designed to make you feel anxious and make you feel afraid. But you can also end that by turning off the movie. So that's how I got into horror, and now it's really all I watch when I watch TV or movies. I don't really watch TV or movies because that gives me anxiety, except horror. I love horror. So that's my story.
I don't know why this just made me think of that, but like, um, I wonder if like at some point there's going to be some type of like therapy that's like horror movie exposure therapy, you know,
Horror
where
movie
where
exposure
like
therapy.
yeah, therapists are like, "Oh, you have a lot of anxiety. You need to watch more horror movies." That's my fantasy of a world where where my therapist tells me to watch more horror movies.
They show you memes and tell you to watch horror movies.
Yeah, right.
I think that's something that a lot of people have experienced just in terms of like horror movies are a form of fear and anxiety that you can control, and I think that there is a lot to that. What about you?
What about me? That definitely happened immediately after with no editing. Okay. So yeah, what about me? It was really interesting for me to hear you talk about just the experience of horror as like controlled fear or controlled anxiety. And I didn't realize this before we started talking about this stuff, but I think that I kind of came to horror in a similar way. Um, so my anxiety as a child was kind of specific. I was really into dinosaurs when I was a kid. Like I was a big dinosaur kid. I knew all the names of the dinosaurs. I had favorite ones. I could pronounce Pachycephalosaurus, which is the dinosaur that has like a bony head and they headbutt each other, um, which is kind of cool. But I was having all of these dinosaur nightmares because I was a kid thinking about these big monsters that could gobble you up and stuff. And I don't know, probably Land Before Time probably scarred me
Oh
too.
yeah.
Great movie, very traumatizing.
Shout out Land Before Time.
Shout out Land Before Time, horror movie. No, just kidding. But then there was like this experience I had where I think you, me, and the cousins were at grandma's house watching cable TV because that was the thing. We didn't have cable, so like we go to grandma's and she had cable, and it was like super fun and exciting. And we were all on grandma's bed watching Jurassic Park.
It's a scary movie.
Yeah, it's like I don't think of it as a horror movie, but
It totally is.
It totally is.
It's a horror movie for sure.
I guess so. Yeah, it does. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally a horror
We
movie.
can talk about that more later.
Yeah.
Jurassic Park being a horror movie is relevant to Five Nights at Freddy's.
Okay. Good. So Jurassic Park came on, and we were all little kids and scared, and that movie terrified me. But after I watched it, I stopped having nightmares about dinosaurs.
That's fascinating.
And if I really think about it and make a bunch of speculation and inferences, I think that it cured my dinosaur fears. So I'm going to say that that's how I got into horror, is that Jurassic Park cured my dinosaur nightmares. The other thing that came to mind is just another another thing that happened where you see something where you're like too young to see it.
Yeah.
Me and
Don't say
me and a friend. We're gonna bleep that out. It's gonna be funny. I was with one of my friends. We were both kids, and the Amityville Horror came on TV, and I just remember us both hiding behind the couch. So the couch was in between us and the television.
That's
and
so
I
funny.
think somebody like found us like that. Like one of our parents found us like that, just like hiding, just terrified but unable to turn the TV off because we didn't want to approach the TV.
I've never seen that movie.
We should add that to the list.
It's on the list.
That's a classic.
It's on my list.
Since my introduction to horror, I remember just always through, I don't know, probably going back to middle school, getting together with friends and making them watch horror movies with me. And that feeling of being scared with other people, kind of like, oh, we're going through this together.
Trauma bonding.
You know, yeah, we're gonna force ourselves to trauma bond, and we're going to feel closer because we've survived our fears together, and that's continued into my adult life. It feels like that's always something that's been an important part of our friendship as siblings.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and like I'll just like call Sarah up and be like, I'm sad, the world is hard. You want to come over and watch horror movies? And yeah, we'll hang out. It'll be a good time. So, next question. I think that there's a lot of different ways to watch a movie, and I am curious, Sarah, when you're watching a horror movie, what are you thinking about?
I try to distance myself from the story a little bit because I still get really scared watching horror movies. So I try to pay attention to what the film creators are doing, the actors, the directors, how all the elements are working together to create fear. Um, and that's kind of how I keep myself from getting too scared. What about you?
Kind of similar, but a little bit different. I think for me, I distance myself from the story, not to keep myself from getting scared. I think I've just seen so many horror movies at this point that I've like desensitized myself a little bit.
Good for you.
So I have to like find other things to watch. Because when I do find a movie that scares me, I get so excited because I'm like, oh yes, like they got me.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then I stay up all night like huddling under the covers.
The thing I realized recently though, because I do still think of myself as being someone who gets scared very easily, but I've also realized that I think my definition of fear has changed a lot, and that my threshold for fear is very different from someone who has never seen a horror movie before.
Yeah,
so when
for
people
sure.
ask me for recommendations and I'll be like, oh, watch this, it's not very scary, I think for me scariness has maybe turned into stuff that's like traumatic, because I
Like real world shit
well
or stuff.
I
don't know.
love
Are we
the,
staring?
I love the movie Nope. I think it's incredible. I love it on every level. And I told some of my friends, I was like, oh, we should watch Nope. Like it only has like a few scary moments. And for me, it only has a few scary moments. But for my friends, it has a lot of it had a lot of scary moments. And they were just like, what are you talking about? This is like, for them, it was just a very different experience for both of us. So
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think like that's an important disclaimer. We have seen a lot of horror movies. And I was going to say, I don't think of you as a person who's easily scared. Like you watch some really scary stuff. And like sometimes I'll be like the one who's like cowering and you're just like chill. But the way that I watch horror movies nowadays, which is different than how I used to, is oftentimes I first think of what are they trying to say? Like what is the artist trying to convey? What are they trying to process? What are they trying to express? Kind of trying to read between the lines of like, what does this ghost represent? Does it represent a challenging relationship with a parent? Does it represent the director's fear of, I don't know, whatever situation? So that's one thing I pay attention to.
Or how is it like manipulating fears of the time?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a really cool thing I hadn't thought of. Like, how does it fit into the culture of the time?
One thing I also look for especially when it comes to ghosts, is like what does the scary thing want? Because like there's a difference. I think a lot of the times you have these visuals and these sound effects that are really terrifying. I'm thinking specifically of The Haunting of Hill House, the TV show.
Yeah.
And what is it? The Hat Man?
Oh,
the tall man?
What is his name? I know who you're talking about.
The tall man? The Hat Man?
He's got a hat and he's tall and he's thin.
There's that really terrifying scene where that child is under the bed. And it's so
scary.
But what does that guy want? What does the ghost want? You know, that's the question.
And we're not going to tell you because that's spoilers. But actually, I don't even remember what he wants.
He wants his hat.
He wants his hat back. Give that man his hat back.
But I'm not saying that it's not scary. I just think it's interesting to think why are we afraid of this thing, and what is especially when it comes to ghosts, I'm interested in what the ghost motivations
What's their motivation? Yeah, totally. I love that. It's a great way of saying it. So another thing that I look at is the artistry of the filmmaking. And I think you mentioned this a little bit. Just how are they trying to bring you into this world? Like, how is the camera work framing things? Like, how do they give you that claustrophobic feeling of being stuck in a closet with a monster outside? How is the color selection and like the filter that they use on the camera contributing to the tone? I watched an interview with Jordan Peele recently where he
Please
says,
send it to me.
I'll send it to you.
We'll link it.
He's talking about the difference between horror and comedy, and he says it's the music. And that blew my mind.
Yeah.
Shout out Jordan Peele, obviously. So sound design, and camera work, writing, acting, just like how are they bringing you into this world? Another thing that I have written down in my notes here is it groundbreaking, or is it just building on stuff that's already been established, as a genre? And like when I think about like groundbreaking films, I think about like The Thing, like when The Thing came out, I feel like it just really broke ground on certain ways of communicating fear and communicating isolation.
Blair Witch Project too.
Oh yeah, I have that written down on my list. We are so on the same page. Night of the Living Dead. The OG zombie movie. They don't even say the word zombie because there's not zombie movies at that time. And that really defined so many movies to come after it. And like The Exorcist. Like The Exorcist is like such a groundbreaking genre film. So that's another thing I look for is just originality. The other thing is suspension of disbelief. Is the acting convincing? Are the characters' backstories and motivations bringing me into the world and not distracting me? And like for stuff that's less grounded in reality, the world building. If it's a magical world, I'm thinking like Guillermo del Toro stuff. Like is the magic in the world consistent so that it's not just like, oh, things are happening just because reasons, magic, or spookiness, and then the last thing that I have written down here is Easter eggs, like tributes to the greats.
Yeah.
I know what you're thinking.
I'm not gonna say anything.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it later.
I love just how much respect there is with horror writers and directors, like how much they pay homage to writers and directors of the past. The position of the sun has changed. It's now hitting you right in the face. I knew that was going to happen. Those are some things that I look for and ways that I watch horror movies. Any final things to add before we move on to the next one?
I don't know. This is just kind of like random, but I'm really interested in learning about film theory and about psychology. And actually, no, I have nothing additional to say. Cut that out.
I love that. Oh man, I could talk so much longer, but we have to move on. Okay. So the next question we decided on is, what are some of our favorite horror genres and also tropes? Because I think that's kind of a unique thing. Well, maybe not totally unique, but in the horror genre, I feel like sometimes people lean into the tropes because it's kind of like an inside joke with fans and the community. So what are some of your favorite horror genres and tropes, Sarah? And give us some examples if you got them.
Yeah, I definitely, and I'm realizing that maybe our definition, like I think horror is a genre, and I don't know if there are subgenres, but that doesn't really matter. The definition's whatever.
Sure.
But I love ghosts. I love the haunted house. I love found footage and exploring trauma. So like we were talking about, I think The Haunting of Hill House, the TV show, that was really cool. Again, you got the ghost, you got the exploring trauma, you got haunted house, found footage. Blair Witch Project, classic.
Yeah.
Wreck, classic. I think Wreck was also one of those like groundbreaking.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
I think both of us really love Grave Encounters. You were
Grave
the one.
Encounters.
You've always loved Grave Encounters, and you introduced me to it, and it's since become one of my favorite movies. Deadstream, we just watched that one, and that was such a fun time. I really enjoyed that.
Yes.
I also like talking about haunted houses and social commentary. His House, that was so scary,
yeah.
but it was so good.
Yes.
And I haven't really been into slashers in the past, but I've been getting into them because I really love Stephen Graham Jones' series, the Indian Lake trilogy, My Heart is a Chainsaw, and Don't Fear the Reaper, which are basically like an homage to the slasher genre. And you should read the series. You should read, like, Stephen Graham Jones is one of my favorite authors. But it's really given me a new appreciation for the slasher genre and made me want to watch slashers with a new framework or lens.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a lot of the same stuff on our lists here because
That's
like,
why we're siblings.
Yeah.
That's the reason we're siblings.
Right. Yeah, we weren't siblings before. So I definitely put at the top of my list found footage. I am a sucker for a good found footage. There's lots of bad found footage.
I love a bad found footage movie too.
Yeah,
though.
honestly, it's just got a special place in my heart. Obviously,
That's the other thing. Sorry to interrupt you, but the other thing I love about horror movies is that good or bad, you're gonna be entertained.
Right. Yes. That. Oh man, we could spend so long talking about bad horror movies. But yeah, found footage. Obviously, Blair Witch, classic example, the OG. And Grave Encounters. Oh, yes. So I also put. I don't know how to describe it, but like beautiful / gothic horror.
Gothic, yeah.
Yeah, like. When
Guillermo
I think
del
of
Toro vibes.
Yeah, totally. Guillermo del Toro, Haunting of Hill House is like the example I put, even though that's a show, not a movie, but whatever, we can talk about those too. And just this idea of you have something that's so beautiful, like a beautiful house. The music is always very like, I don't know, expressive, and yeah, Guillermo del Toro is probably like Pan's Labyrinth is like such a good example of just beautiful horror. Slashers I have on here, but I put over the top slashers and slasher comedy. Because I don't really like slashers that feel too real. Like, I'm not really like a gore person if it feels real.
That'll be an interesting thing to explore as we go on this podcast journey.
Yeah, kind of where that line is.
Yeah.
And then I've always had a huge love of just demonic movies. I love me a good demon. I love just like the idea of something or just possessions. I think I'm just fascinated by that stuff. It's some of the scariest stuff for me.
Oh yeah, I bet.
And then for tropes, which I separated from subgenres in my list, I love it when a skeptical asshole dies in a karmic comeuppance. The example that comes to mind for me is Paranormal Activity, the crypto bro, I don't know, day trading boyfriend who's like, whatever, babe, like, I don't care about your feelings, blah, 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 blah. I don't know.
Facts don't care.
And then like he just like gets what's coming. I feel like this is probably something we have in common. I love me a good final girl.
Oh yeah, final
Gotta
girl
love a
for
final
sure.
girl. Sarah, briefly, could you talk about what a final girl is?
No.
Okay. And then another trope. I don't know if you could call this a trope or just like a artistic technique, is like the idea of like perfect on the outside, repressed emotions on the inside, and then the repressed emotions manifest as whatever is haunting them or terrorizing them.
That's a good one. That reminds me too, I love the angsty child.
Angsty child. Ooh, I didn't even think about that.
Well, I feel like in a lot of movies, there's usually a child who is going through some sort of upheaval in their life. Maybe it's a move. Maybe it's their parents are getting divorced. Maybe, their parents died. That is a favorite trope of mine.
Yes, that's a really good point. I really like that as well. Just like the idea of, okay, we're going to take you, the audience, and put you in the position of this child who nobody believes or nobody is like paying attention to, and just like the vulnerability. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yes. And I'm also thinking now it's connected to another thing you see very often, which is, I think, parenthood. I'm thinking specifically of movies like Guillermo del Toro movies. So what was that movie we saw recently about the teeth?
Oh,
The child's teeth.
the child's teeth. What is it called?
I'm also thinking about Megan.
Oh yeah.
Thinking about Megan, thinking about Guillermo del Toro's movie Mama, and the other Guillermo del Toro movie about the tooth fairies.
The tooth fairies.
Where you have these people who are
remember what it's called.
forced into a position of parenthood who don't feel equipped for that parenthood. And I think that also happens. You see that in the Babadook also.
Oh, totally.
And I think it's a pretty common trope.
Yeah, that's excellent point.
The child's teeth.
Oh, so I think oh my gosh, this is the risk of doing a podcast with somebody who cracks me up as much as my sister. We have, I think I mentioned this before, we're always recommending horror movies to each other, and we're always saying, like, add it to the list. Like, I don't even know if there is a list. Maybe you keep a list because you're organized.
Sometimes.
But there's so many movies that we always are, quote unquote, adding to the list. So we're not going to talk about all of them, but just briefly, what are some movies that you haven't seen that you would like to watch? Either because they're classics or because they look like something you'd be interested in.
So I've never seen Nightmare on Elm Street. I think
Really?
that's a necessary one to see.
You've never seen Nightmare on Elm Street?
Never seen Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh my gosh.
I have also never seen Rosemary's Baby. I don't know that I really want to watch it, but I'll watch it.
I don't think I've seen that one either.
It looks, I don't know if it looks scary. It doesn't look like, I'll watch it if I have to, just for the sake of.
Is it a classic?
It's a classic.
It's a classic. Okay.
I want to watch more movies that are made by James Wan, like Insidious and like The Conjuring. I actually don't think I've ever seen Insidious. I may have seen the first Conjuring movie, but I don't think I've seen much of that series.
Okay.
I think he did Annabelle also.
That would make sense. It seems like,
or I think
stylistically.
I think maybe he didn't do it, but I think he had some involvement with Annabelle. But I also want to watch more movies that are produced by Akilah Cooper, like Malignant. I've heard really good things about that. And I also put movies about the Warrens, which include like The Conjuring, Annabelle, Amityville. And I also want to watch more international horror because that really scares me.
Yes.
Especially we saw the Japanese version of The Grudge, the Curse.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry if I mispronounced this, Ju-on, but it really scared me, and I'm terrified to watch more, but I do want to watch more Japanese horror and more horror from around the world stuff that, like, you know, I want to broaden what I watch.
That's definitely a big thing. I have seen some stuff lately that has just broke me out of my rut. You know, I feel like sometimes seeing stuff from other cultures and other parts of the world can really get you scared again because it is totally different ways of thinking about things sometimes. So what I have on my list, this is kind of short in terms of what movies do I want to watch. X is on there because
these are movies you haven't seen.
Movies I haven't seen.
Mm-hmm.
X, I really like A24 films like Midsommar and Hereditary. And I've just heard really good things about X.
I didn't realize it was by them.
Yeah, it's an A24 film.
I saw it.
Yeah.
I liked it.
Don't tell me anything. Okay, and then the other one I have on here, which I've been bugging Sarah about for a while. Someday the time will be right. Skinamarink.
Oh, yeah. We got to do it.
Yeah, I have no idea what that movie is about, but it looks so scary. I watched the first 5 minutes and I was by myself and I realized that was not a movie that I could watch by myself. It seems like it's kind of, I don't know, artsy, groundbreaking, and I'm just really curious about it. It looks very scary. So yeah, someday.
I've also realized I've never seen the original or any of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies.
What?
And I haven't seen the original Pet Sematary.
Okay. All right. Well,
we got a list. Yeah, add it to the list.
Oh my gosh, you haven't seen Texas Chainsaw?
No.
That's wild. That just screams Sarah all over it.
What does that say?
The reason I'm kind of surprised you haven't seen Texas Chainsaw is like when I think of iconic Final Girl, like, anyways, we'll watch it. Okay.
Can we? There are like movies though that I really want to rewatch that I haven't seen in a long time, like Scream. Want to rewatch Scream?
Ooh.
Want to rewatch the original Halloween? Alien. We're talking Final Girls. Alien, obviously.
Yeah.
You haven't seen Pet Cemetery, like the new Pets. I haven't seen the old Pet Cemetery. You haven't seen the new Pet Cemetery.
Sometimes dead is better.
Sometimes dead is better. I'd like to rewatch Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah, me too. Just because of what it is to the genre. Okay, so to wrap things up, we just wanted to talk briefly about what you can expect from this podcast. We are going to actually get together and write down our list so that we have a list. In general, I think the plan is that we're going to put the names on the list into a hat or a bucket and just pull them at random. And that will be what we watch and discuss for the next podcast. For this first episode, just because we don't have our list made yet.
And also because I'm currently kind of obsessed with this movie.
Right. We're going to be talking about Five Nights at Freddy's, which I have not seen. Sarah has seen it. She has been recommending it very highly to me.
On the one hand, I'm just like, it's not an amazing movie. And on the other hand, I'm like, it's an amazing movie. So I really want to see what someone who hasn't dived into the lore thinks about this movie with no prior knowledge. Or like you're going in fresh slate.
I am a newborn baby for Five Nights at Freddy's.
The other thing I just wanted to throw in at the end is that, so the podcast is horror/stories. And one of the things I'm hoping to do, just because writing about books is something I do a lot in my free time, hoping to draw in some interviews, maybe with authors or with people in the book community, especially on the subject of fear. People who write about fear, people who read about fear, or even just readers who maybe they don't write or read about fear, but they're into horror movies.
Yeah, so that is what you can expect. Next episode is going to be Five Nights at Freddy's. And thanks so much for listening. We're so excited to share this with you.